city? Who lives on campus? Who goes to the city quite a bit? Yeah, nothing exciting in the city over the weekend? Okay. Try to get out more. Chicago's a great place. Right? There's lots to do. Explore the city. What did I do with the kids this weekend? Took them to Oz Park, which is in Lincoln Park. Pretty cool park. Has all the scarecrow, the lion, and the castles that we played. Pretty cool place, right by Lincoln Park High School, where some of my family members graduated from. Okay, so I wanted to get 2 presentations done this week because we have Thanksgiving break next week. So who's our next group? Group 5. Maybe you could present Wednesday, and then I have group 6. Are you group 6? Anybody group 6? Next weekend. Maybe I can have them present Friday. We can knock out 2 presentations in 1 week. Today we are looking at emerging adulthood, right? Becoming an adult. I'm going to switch between slides, so I have one from another class, and they had just a little bit better information, some graphics and stuff. So I'll switch between one from the textbook and just this one, because we're actually in chapter 13. This is chapter 10 from another book. But this has some pretty decent information, so I'll switch between the 2. All right, so we talked last week about what it is to be an adolescent, challenges, right? Sense of culture shock going into high school, these changes, raging hormones, right? The broad distance between emotionality and reasoning. We tend to be a little bit more emotional as high schoolers, teenagers. Here we're still somewhat in our teen years. But we're going to face new challenges now. Huge challenges, right? It's almost like being born again to some degree, because now you become a full-fledged adult, a legal adult majority, which means in some cases, if you're over 21, you're able to drink, you're able to smoke, you can get a job. You're now entering college, right? A whole new change of environment. You have a ton of more independence. Essentially, you might start doing whatever it is you want to do. Move away from the control of the family. Not easy. I would say this is if I could go back, I'd maybe go back to like 6 years older, maybe like 12 or something, right? Being an adult, it has its perks, but it does have extreme challenges, right? One is that depending on your family context, people are getting old and dying. So you start to see real huge changes. Mom and dad, grandparents may have died off, right? Siblings are getting older. And so you have to deal with your first sort of realization of huge losses, right? Which is traumatic in itself. A little bit of introspection is needed. We start to question the purpose of life, the meaning. Is there a meaning? Do we just create the meaning ourselves, right? Is religion the answer? Other things too, right? Physical things, which we're going to focus on here first, is, hey, now that we are in this new environment, how does it change our sort of physical evolution? Are we in environments that don't have healthy food options? Thus we become unhealthy and obese. Are we exercising? Like, wow, now I'm really going to exercise as I put on the weight or whatever. Like before, I didn't have to do nothing. You just eat. It came off automatically. All right, so you're like, hey, there's a ton of challenges here, both physical and cognitive. The way we think will be different. Right? We begin to really challenge some of the knowledge, right? We would have different sort of perspectives. You're like, well, are things relative? Does everything depend on the context? black and white. It's either yes or no. Right? You don't like the gray too much. Some people take all information and say it's yes and no. It's both. Why? Because the circle only has one line. And life is a circle. It's both negative and positive, right? Some people take the full information in. Big other challenges, right? Being honest, humility, a little bit of struggle. We're struggling with our own self-esteem and insecurities. So, I don't know, we make up the information, we lie to people to get what we want, right? Maybe we feel a sense of loss, a sense of failure if we don't meet the markers. Oh, I fell down in college, now what? Went to college and didn't get the job I thought I would get. Now what? I have a job, a worthless job, and you feel like you can't escape it, and it doesn't really make money. But life is crappy, I thought it would have been greater than this. Now what? Right? So you get to the now what's, and how you're going to address and deal and evaluate the now what's. Right? So you get to real things, and you begin to sort of shed off a lot of the social relationships that you once had. You start to realize that you are a certain type of person, right? Thus, a lot of people may not work for you in life. Okay, so here we're talking about maybe 19 to 30s. There's no real consensus, right? We're going to start off with early adulthood, which is, let's say, to mid-30s, before we hit a midlife crisis. Late adulthood would be, like over 65 when things decline. Hey, but things decline here too, physically. Genetics, your genes do not stop replicating and dividing. The cells don't stop dividing, right? And depending on your environment, depending on your own natural genetics, things decline. So the 5-year-old can hear better than the 18-year-old, right? So there's an optimum, and then things begin to decline. Your vision will get worse. Yeah, you have a predisposition to be born with glasses, right? Your vision's a little bit impaired, most likely genetic, but it'll get worse over time. Some people may never need glasses, right? Or they may need them later in life, 70, 80 years old. Some people have good genes for teeth. They can brush once a day and have them for 80 years. Some people have teeth falling out in their 30s. Other things too, we'll talk about substance use, the increase of that, starting a family, the challenges in starting a family, all of that. All right, so what we'll learn is what role transitions mark entry into adulthood, how does going to college fit into the transition into adulthood, so this highly involves you, right? The challenges that you have now, figuring out your path, are you certain, are you uncertain what you're gonna do? Right? Does it make sense? Is it going to make the money that you want it to make? And then some behavioral criteria mark the transition to adulthood, and how does achieving financial independence? We'll look at that. So we said, hey, no definitive criteria for early adulthood, but we will say it's about 19 to mid-30s for the most part, but we can't put a definitive sort of number on it. Especially here in the West, right? Eastern cultures, people grow up pretty quick. Collectivistic. You already are pre-assigned a wife, a husband. It's not your choosing. It's culturally related, religiously related, right? You already maybe pre-assigned a vocation, some work. Like, God, this is what we've been doing. We have the farm, you're working on the farm. We got such as an avocado farm, right? This is what you do, you take on the family. But here in the West, we say, hey, there's very few people, right? Very few of the minority. Social and demographic trends since the 1970s have created the new developmental period. So we kind of created this period and want to focus on more developmental psychology to see exactly what's actually happening at this stage and how we can consolidate identifying this stage as being its own stage. Quarter life crisis, similar to a midlife crisis, but occur in our 20s. Anyone here face I know you're probably not 20s yet, maybe some of you are 20. Any crises? Not yet, right? Say maybe not yet, right? Because maybe most of you are, once again, living on campus, mom or dad or government paying for the schooling, which is fine. Kind of chill, relax, just go to school, do well, continue to pay. All right, so many of you, I don't believe anyone has children. All right, well, that's a non-factor. That would be a significant stressor to have children. Maybe no one believes, abusing any substances to that degree. So you say, hey, you have actually not a lot of responsibility in any true sense, like absolute responsibility, like children, where there's really no escaping the responsibility, right? Maybe for most of you, like, I go to college, hopefully it works out, right? They like, if it don't, I'll just go get a job. There's always the alternative. But there could be other stressors. You're like, hey, now I'm in these real relationships with real emotions, and I find out that people are not what they seem, right? This perspective on the naivety of positive in people. We think that we may have the sort of thought that people are genuinely good in some sense, and how we view people to be good, right? People are generally good. We find out that generally people are really self-centered. We just use different terms for it. I mean, we all have it, but we call someone a narcissist, right? Egotistical, right? But we probably have a little bit of that ourselves. It's just to which degree and how we kind of do that, right? So we find that people really are not as trustworthy as you think. It's very difficult. Now you're in these new situations and relationships built on trust, right? And you say, I didn't have that issue before when I was a kid. I didn't have to worry about that. Mom and dad was all I need to trust. That's all they had. So we say, hey, new responsibilities are huge, such as marriage. Some of you may say, hey, I want to get married in my early 20s. You're like, okay, I want to finish college, get a bachelor's, get a job, then get married, then have children, and just go from there, right? That might be sort of the natural progression, but that is a huge transition, marked with a lot of new challenges on the idea and social construct of marriage. And is it a legal thing? Is it a spiritual thing? Is it a religious thing? Commitments, died till death do us part? I'm like, I don't know. Is it really till death do us part? Maybe, maybe not. You're like, well, till death do us part unless you cheat. You're like, then what's the till death do us part? How are you gonna make the vow? Right? Unless you cheat. Like, these are whole new ways of thinking. You're like, wow, I didn't think about that. Right? The what ifs. What if somebody ends up being a scumbag? And like, just part of their natural evolution. Because they're an individual, they're a human being who's living their life with their own sort of path. Rites of passage, right? We have things like big, huge markers. Graduation, right? The beginning of something new, the end of something else. One day you'll graduate here at the university, hopefully, and it marks something new. We all celebrate. Society sort of acknowledges it. Why we call it a rite, a ritualistic thing. We all kind of center around it. Everybody gets together for the graduation, the cap and gown, right? Celebrate. Marriage, 150 people show up. Wedding costs $30,000. Like, what's up with all the people? Like, well, this socially is a huge thing. It's a huge transition. It signifies something that is meaningful to us, right? But it also signifies kind of the silent part. It signifies challenges. And that's the part usually silent, right? People don't tell you about how difficult it is to be an adult, right? The real challenges, depression, and trying to pay bills, and you got children and a family. And you have a meaningless job that gives you no sense of worth. You're stuck at it, right? Just living day to day, pay your bills. Very challenging. All right, college attendance, right? Things have increased since the early 1900s. 70% of high school graduates are in college, close to it, 67%. Right, so it shows that almost, almost 2/3 of individuals who graduate high school go to college. So we sense to have a value of college education. Now the other question would be, is college worth it? Right? Like, is it? Like I said, it depends. Right? Challenge here would be like, well, you know what? Maybe it's a recommendation. It's a recommendation to get a license. What kind of license? A legal license. Right? You gotta go get a Juris Doctor to be a lawyer, JD. Like us. Required for get a licensing in state of Illinois for nursing. Right? But you do the work, the academic work, before you even apply for the license to become a nurse. All right, so we say in some capacities it is necessity. Others not so much, right? You think maybe liberal arts, things of that nature, like, not necessarily required. You may just have a natural gift and aptitude for something. Painting. You go to college for painting, go to college for sculpturing. Maybe you do. Maybe like, hey, I'm learning philosophy of art, understanding the history of it and all of the other things, right? The new challenges. You figuring out, is college worth it? Is it gonna take you where you think it's gonna take you with the amount of debt that you will incur? For most people, right? The college is expensive over time. We have something called non-traditional students or returning students over the age of 35. You all will be traditional, means you just went to college straight out of high school, right? But there are some non-traditional students, maybe a little bit older, went out and worked at first, may want to change careers, get a whole new education, start from scratch, and go from there. They'll be a little bit more pragmatic, self-directed, which means that you're younger, you know you have time, right? You could blow off a lot of things because you have time as younger adults in this period. You have a lot more time, right? Well, who cares, give or take a year or two. There shows actually no difference in like professional success if you graduate a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. So you really do have time. Right? Won't make all the difference in the world, if you slow things up just a little bit. But for a lot of people, they want to gain the competitive edge and get in the workforce earlier, right? So they can start planning other things in life, not hanging around college forever. Advanced degrees, who's going to get a master's? What are you going for? What's your major?
Business.
It's an MBA. Who else? There is okay.
Nursing.
Right? Okay, so graduate degrees. You're like, hey, they may actually pay me more. I might actually learn something even to a higher sort of level to a degree, right? So it really depends on the objective. Are you trying to have career advancement? Are you trying to learn something more? What's the goal there? All right, college success increases with students' psychological well-being and when all parties take responsibility are supportive, which means that if mom and dad are paying, they have to be involved in the process of you going to college, right? Usually that's your overall well-being. But if the parents call and just say, hey, I sent the check in the mail, how your grades are, and just tell them, and that's the basis of the conversation, that's it. Usually they're not identifying the stressors. It is stressful. Come on, who wants to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning to a psychology class? I don't want to show up till 8 o'clock. I teach class. But hey, it has its own stressors, right? Things going on within college. You may be going through something, psychological distress that you're not disclosing to people. You may be struggling financially. Like, I can't even afford this and that. Nobody knows. Right? So you keep it all to yourself. Unhealthy behavior. We say if it's in and not out, it's unhealthy. It doesn't stay in and just disappear. It doesn't work that way. It's not how it works. You need someone to talk to, and it's good to have support. All right, edge work. At this stage, early adulthood, right? say now you start to really push the limits on things. You start to go hiking on your own in the forest. You'll go take a trip by yourself. You may go to a party where you don't know someone all by yourself. Right? You start to do very sort of risky behavior. Maybe you start to gamble. You're like, damn, we bet it all on 7. Damn, I lost. There goes the rent money. Right? At this stage, you say, hey, you know what? I still have a lot of life to live. Mom and dad are in 70s or 80s. I could risk a little bit more. Let me do things that they normally wouldn't have done because I saw where it led them. So we tend to try to go beyond our parents in any sort of risk. Right? Generally, the older people are a little bit more risk averse. They're a little bit more sensitive with their money, how they do things, the planning of it. At this age, you say no. You say, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna get wasted, totally wasted. Right? Knowing that the risk is really high for getting wasted around people you don't know. Right? Not sure what can happen with that. Men generally do not rehearse what we call edge work, right? Kind of placing ourselves in a psychologically risky situation. And think about this too in relationships at this stage. You say, hey, I want to date the risky person. Right? What's the risky person? Like the person who lives a certain lifestyle. You're like, hey, that sounds interesting. Let me try to date a criminal. I know he's a criminal. No, he's in jail. But it's very stimulating. Right? But let's see where it goes. Right? You talk to someone who's reasonable and rational, and like, I don't think that, someone who knows you, but I don't think that's really good for you. That person, why? I don't know, I can see what you can't see, right? Because emotions are involved. So we even get into very risky relationships where domestic violence occurs. Like you didn't see that coming. Like you didn't see that aggression in that person, but I did, but I thought I could change them. And we say personal favor, we think we're special. We think we can change people. That's usually fundamentally not true. People are who they are based on all the factors, right? Nature, nurture, personalities, etc. Right? So here we tend to be, earlier on we get into these risky relationships. Risky, like, oh man, I don't think that person's good for you. Right? I think that person's a cheater. I think that person's promiscuous. You're trying to get them involved in a serious relationship. I think that person's violent. I think that person is into illegal activities that'll bring you into their environment of illegalities. Right? And you're like, no, it's okay. I can change them. It's me. I'm special. Right? So men tend to not really rehearse these, especially when it comes to physical things. So you get people jumping off of cliffs on vacation for Instagram worthy stuff, TikTok stuff, right? Drinking an accessible amount of alcohol, right? Seeing how far you can take the drugs, right? We think that women are a little bit more rehearsing with this. Prefrontal cortex. Everybody say, hey, the brain, the front part that makes us human beings, right? The part that separates us from the other animals that allow us to think of past, present, and future, right? I don't know if the animals are reflecting on what happened 15 years ago like that. I don't know if the animals are planning for 10 years ahead. Right? They're probably more adept to immediate survival. Let's live in the now. Whereas we're planning, right? So 10 years from now, I want to be this, like this, my idealistic versions of how life should be, right? And like, well, the animals probably don't face depression like that. You're like, how come? They don't care about 10 years out. They don't even, that's not even a concept in their mind, right? They're not conceptualizing even about tomorrow. We are. We have anxiety about tomorrow. We got anxiety about what happened 10 years ago, what happened to us. Right? doubt that they're pondering those things that happen to them. Hence, the animals don't really have depression. Now, they have stress, right? Stress kills. We know that. Zebras die at an early age from ulcers. Like, why do zebras have ulcers? If you're in the Serengeti, right, you're hyper vigilant, aware that there are hyenas and lions that at any point you got to listen out for. And if you hear them close by, most likely you're dead. That's the end of your life, right? So we do know that stress kills. It doesn't kill maybe in some shocking way, it kills over time, right? The buildup of stress kills. It lowers the immune system, right? Stress lowers your immune system, meaning now you get sick all the time. Cancers, it doesn't create it, but it exacerbates it. So if you have cancer, say second stage of some form of cancer, quickly jump to 3 and 4. Why? You're stressed out. You're stressed out about the idea of cancer, and not the fact that you have it. Now it's increased the propensity for you to die and become terminal even quicker because of stress. All right, so think of stress. You are probably, who here is not stressed? And I say in some general way. Generally, you are not stressed. Like, remember when we think of this anxiety, where you just constantly feel a little wired, feel like something, right? You're just overly stimulated, like so much going on. Right? Who here doesn't feel that? Right, you have to feel it. You're a multi-dimensional, multimodal thinker right now. You got to multitask. How many classes you got? I don't know. How much homework, presentations, finals, family stuff. Now you're in sports. When's the game? You got to talk to coach. In a relationship. Is the person good for me? Am I planning marriage? Am I planning to break up with them? That's a lot, which means we all kind of suffer from it, right? But the real difference is those who really know how to manage it very well. And for the most part, you say that's really a thinking process, a process of thinking. In terms of locus of control, I think we talked about that a little bit earlier in the semester. Do you believe with your thoughts that you are in completely control, or do you believe that the external world is all in control? Where do you lie on that spectrum? Degree to which usually is how the person will have stress. So you either say like, hey, it's the universe, who cares? That person might be less stressed, like if they were extreme. So if they're extreme, they say it does not matter. I'm not in control. This was all predetermined. That today was going to be today, no matter what I did, no matter how I thought. Yesterday was yesterday if it was already written, right? Universe 14.6 billion years old. You're like, what does that mean? It means that we could see the edge. We saw what happened close to 15 billion years ago. They're like, well, okay, it's time relative. Yeah. If they were able to see us, we wouldn't exist right now. Think about it. You're on another planet X amount of light years away and you saw Earth, let's say a few 100 million years, you would literally see, if you could zoom into landmass, you'd see dinosaurs. Right? You're like, where's Professor Ross? Right? They don't exist at the time you were able to see it. Right? What they call speed of light, or speeds of causality, or speed of information. That's literally what light means. Light means causation of information. So yeah, if you take on these sort of thought, you say, hey, how I develop a system of thinking so that it lowers my stress. And some people say, no, it's all me. Like, it's all you. That's a huge burden. So at this stage, a lot of individuals early on think it's all on them. Their locus of, internal locus of control. It says mostly all me. Like that concept mentally is stressful. Think of coming to do a presentation, like, hey, why am I stressed? Like, oh, because I might mess up. You might mess up in the next 2 minutes, or when it's your time to speak. Why is that even a concept? You're preparing for something in the future that you do not control. All you can do is do the best with the information that you have at the time that you get it. That's the best that will happen at that moment, right? So living moment to moment might be good, or we would call it some sort of stoic philosophy, right? That'd be really good for mental health at this stage. All right, so we say prefrontal cortex involving high level thinking, not fully developed in its mid-20s. If that's the case, that still means that your age group is still emotional. A little bit more emotional than my age group, naturally. Now, things can change, other factors, right? Some people, we say, mature very early, and maybe their prefrontal cortex is already getting to be done. Right? They may have matured. How do they mature? They get to go work, do some hard work early. Their life experience created new connections in their brains for neurons to prepare them to survive for really hard things. And we say, no, someone else has it easy. Easy peasy, mom and dad takes care of them to their 25. They have little experience with real world adulthood challenges. So those connections aren't made. So if the connections aren't made, and you're still with the prefrontal cortex, you say you're still a little bit more emotional. When hard stuff tends to happen, that person won't be able to handle it, right? And they will suffer psychological distress. Like they freak out. Oh my God, the world is ending. Someone is like, oh, who cares? All right, so all the hypotheses, high risk taking with lesser prefrontal cortical development. So we say, all right, maybe that's an older one, is you're taking more risk because prefrontal cortex is not developed completely. Newer data, some other data. We say, well, it's socio-demographics. Right? Higher risk taking means the human being who has less to lose takes way more risk. If you go into an impoverished neighborhood, you can see this. You could be killed. Why? Because they will risk life and limb and go to jail. You actually care about going to jail. So you're not going to do some things that will send you to jail. Some people in certain socio-demographics where going to jail is a natural part of life. Going to prison. Might actually be a badge of honor. And for you, come on, I don't want to do that. I want to travel the world and make money and stay out of the legal system, right? So we say mainly poverty. Poverty is highly associated with risk taking because there's a tendency to believe that. So your minimum baseline is so low that you think being great is almost unfathomable. So for you college students, you think being great is within reach. That's why you're here. You want to be great. But for other people, depending on the level of poverty, they're kind of like, I'm not going to be great. Why? My mom and dad were. Everybody I know within my neighborhood were. Right? They were not great. Thus, we'll take more risks. There's the early years of pregnancy, right? Multiple children, good economic standing, proper education to move up in the ladders of life, all the things that require real adulthood is not really taken that way, right? So you just do high risk taking. Don't go to school, don't get the right jobs, etc. Don't do the hard work. Like you don't do the work because you want everything easy, because you just don't expect things to be your way anyway. Intimacy versus isolation, right? Major psychosocial conflict during young adulthood. So intimacy involves creating shared identity with another. This is bonding. This is pairing up with people in any relationship, not just like romantic situations, but really who are going to be the people around you to take you to the next level. Right? The old adage is like, oh, you are the sort of baseline of your 5 closest people you're around. So if people say, hey, who are your 5 closest friends? We kind of see how great you'll be, the limitations of your own life. Right? It's kind of like whoever you surround yourself should kind of scaffold and support you to be even better. Usually people should be better than you. Right? If you're the best in the group and you find that you're struggling to even achieve, it says a lot about the group. So as you learn in life, the most successful people are the people who surround themselves with people who are better than them, smarter than them. People who are egotistical won't do that. They usually suffer greatly. They're too egotistical to allow somebody to even to acknowledge that someone's more smarter than them in certain areas. Right? It stifles their growth. So people go into isolation at times, right? Because it may become difficult to build these intimate relationships, sharing something in common with someone of some kind. It could be sports, right? It could be sports. It could be culture, right? It could be something you're interested in, activities, a profession, something to the degree of which. So we say strong sense of one identity needed to achieve this intimacy. Some conflicting results. Only some research shows stronger identities to predict higher intimacy. Right? But we do think that is a real contributing factor. That you have a real sense of who you are. So you know to align yourself with people who truly are what you are. Right? Not kind of playing a role. I'm going to go to the other slides here in a second. Okay, so here's a discussion question that I had. So in this stage, reasoning and thinking, right, are very sort of, they have sort of multi-dimensions to them, which means we all kind of think of them in different, we think differently depending on the age group in this stage. But there tends to be a gap between emotionality, as we saw with the prefrontal cortex, and logic, right? So they say, hey, reason or logic, right, versus your emotions. Right? So we say, hey, someone can be way over here, right? And someone can be way over here, and someone can be way over here. So let me ask you this. What are the pros and cons to having a huge gap between one's reason and logic and their emotions? In terms of, say, this stage, your age. What are the pros and cons? Is it good to be highly emotional? Is emotions just part of our socialization process? Right? We know that some people have high emotional intelligence, but then they may be a little bit illogical. Right? Maybe they might not be a little bit honest because their emotions won't allow them to be. Good guard. And then we get the people who are saying, hey, black or white. It is or it isn't. Right? Everything is plus and minus. Here we say that people are a little bit more gray, right? A little bit more objective. A little bit more having both a healthy balance. What are your thoughts? What are some of the pros and cons of these sorts of modes? What are the pros and cons of being highly emotional with little logic? Pros and cons of being too logical with no emotions. No emotions, right? We get the people who are highly intelligent, but there's nothing really there. Can't get any sort of emotional information from them. They're just all scientifically minded people. They just operate on science. The knowledge, the study of knowledge itself, right? Then other people go back, hey, I pick up other things. Besides the information, the knowledge, the science, emotions are here for a reason. That's why we have them. And they may even be moral. They may even be moral. And then there's some people like, it's a little bit of both. All right, I give you a few minutes to talk in a group about that. Pros and cons.
We'll start like this.
The reason there's no sympathy towards others. It's just you're going based off information. Yeah.
What do you think? We're gonna start on the left side. Pros. Oh, having too much emotion.
I'll just give these for reference, we'll put them up there, right? So we got the people who are abstract without practicality, right? Very abstract, think of creative thinkers without the practical aspects of life. People who are dualistic, okay, is it black and white? Is it Republican, Democrat? Right? Is it this and that? Nowhere in the middle. Pick a side, choose a side, that's all that matters. People who are relativistic, it depends. Everything depends on the context. Right? Or people who have some sort of reflective judgment, which would be in the middle. Say, hey, all the stuff matters. All the stuff matters. Give me some time to evaluate, and I'll come up with a sort of thought or an emotion on it. I'll come up with an expression. Okay, so I just put that for reference, but continue this discussion. The pros and cons.
Say reason and logic can I don't know, make you feel like selfish and only worry about like yourself and think about yourself, but you don't think about others and everything. So that's what I'm getting out of it. So I don't know.
I think it would add like you're very stubborn. Now my reason is the best reason, so it doesn't matter.
Like you don't care about anyone else. It's just yours.
Yeah.
Now I would say for like too much emotion, you could do like
I do use real world examples of people you know who have those sort of modes of thinking.
Any small thing will have a breakdown. The smallest inconvenience will have a breakdown.
you won't have any sort of logic or reason behind all the things that you do. You just let your emotions take control over you. So that's what
Think of yourselves. Think of, can you identify which one you are? Can you identify which one you are?
honestly, I'm probably more. I lean towards the logic and reasoning.
All right, let's see what we got. Group over here. Thoughts?
Like when it comes to emotions, I feel like it's good to connect with others maybe.
Who are just as emotional?
Like who are more emotional maybe.
Okay. So emotions are good because it helps form
Or like
connections. You're like, hey, we probably bond emotionally more so than we bond thinking. Now we may think that like, no, I'm smart. Oh my God, I love your brain. I love the way you think. You're so smart. Right? They're like, really, that in itself, there's something deeper than that. There's some emotions behind it. It's an idea, a concept of some sort. So that would be the pro. What are some of the cons?
And then on the other side would be like sometimes your emotions can take over and you might not be as like not saying what you really mean, like how you said, not being so honest or like being like more logic.
Hey, emotions might not allow us to be honest with people. Hey, I promise I'll do this. Like really in your mind, like, I'm not gonna do that. Why are you promising? Because I can't bring myself to be direct, logical. In fact, sorry, I can't do that. I can't, because of let me tell you why I can't do it. This, and that reason. That's difficult for most people, honestly, because you're kind of like, oh, I feel some type of way. Why are you turning me down? Why are you saying no? Right? We lie to the homeless. Hey man, sorry, I don't have $1. Yes, you do. You get what I'm saying? But your emotions, that will make you feel uncomfortable. If I get $1, just want to give it to you. Right? So you're like, hey, there are, but most of us operate that way, which means most of us are not really that logical. Because if we're logical, we'd be honest. hey, do you got a girlfriend or boyfriend? The person says, yeah, I got like 5 of them. You still wanna go out? Or the person lies. Oh, I'm sorry to tell you about those other 4, 3 months later. Now we got issues, right? So, the cons. So emotions do really impact us, I think. Good example. All right. Any thoughts, pros and cons?
For like logic, like if you're too logical, you might not have like a empathy for someone. But if you're too emotional, you might not like think of things like logically. You might like try to think of things creatively when sometimes you just have to go for like the facts and logic of one thing.
Emotions stifle decision making. It's too confusing, right? It makes wrong choices. You choose the poor choice because you're driven by emotion. When your rationality tells you no, 1 + 1 = 2. This is the best way to do something, right? Back there, anything?
For pros and cons, you said like if you're too logical, you'd probably be more selfish and stubborn on your personality. You'd probably think of like you said, 1 + 1 = 2, and if somebody says anything different, you're probably like, my reasoning is the best, your opinion doesn't matter. You'll probably have that my way or the highway mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. You're like, hey, I believe in a religion. I say, all of it? Like, yeah, I do. You practice it? No, I don't. Then why don't you practice it? Like, I don't know why. Like, the logic doesn't add up to emotion. Emotionally, you believe in it in an idealistic sense, but you don't believe in it enough to actually practice it in the real life. There's a difference between a reality and that ideal. The ideals are emotional. They're in some fantasy land, how we think things should be. But yet in our own lives, we don't even do anything about that. Over here, any thoughts? Anyone? Yeah. My mom's 90, right? And I gotta take her to the hospital. We all take her to the hospital all the time, on dialysis 3 times a week, right? Back and forth to the hospital. And we deal with a lot of nurses, right? For all you future nurses. And sometimes we come across ones that are so nurturing, so, oh my gosh, oh, too much. Where it's like, you don't even get the job. Could you do something for me, please? And then you get the ones who you say feel cold-hearted. You'd be like, man, they get all the information. I just don't have a connection with them. I want somebody else. I said, why? Like you said, they have a sense of no empathy. They're here to do the science. They can solve the problem, but they don't transfer any emotions that make me feel like they give a damn. And I need someone to give a damn as part of being a human being. Social, remember we said emotional needs over material needs, always, with those monkeys. If that emotional need is not met, even if, hey, thanks for the medication, hey, you might die, because you're like, your emotional needs aren't being met. That's a huge part of being a human being. Over here. Anything?
You basically said the same thing. If you're all logic, you're gonna hurt other people because you don't have empathy. If you're all emotion, then you're just gonna go after your emotions, but you can't really control them. So you're gonna say things you don't mean and hurt other people too.
Yeah, emotions are, remember that, emotions are disguised. There's an interesting book called The Human Animal, right? And some of that, I'll let you get out of here. But basically what he did, he was like, he's a psychologist, but what he wanted to go out and study people's behavior without ever talking to them. He studied body language, handshakes, how people make agreements when seeing people are in arguments from far away. Not what people think, right? But actually what people do. Interesting, but you get a chance, take a look at it. All right, everyone, have a great day. Group 5 will be presenting on Wednesdays in Group 6.